Present us, O Lord, in all our doings with thy most gracious favor, and further us with thy continued help, that in all our works begun, continued, and ended in thee, we may glorify thy holy name, and finally, by thy mercy, attain everlasting life. Amen. Routine proceedings, introduction of guests. I recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, seated in your gallery are individuals promoting Heart Failure Awareness Week, which is being observed May 5th to the 11th this year. Carolyn Sir with the Heart and Stroke Foundation and Dr. Andrea Lavoie, an interventional cardiologist at the Heart Function Clinic, have brought with them today patients, caregivers, and healthcare staff from across the province who wish to increase awareness about heart failure in Saskatchewan. I'm going to go through some names here, Mr. Speaker, and I apologize if I missed anyone or if I've named somebody who's not here and if I've mispronounced a name, but I just want to get these all on the record if I can. Brenda Hildebrandt, Harrison Thunderchild, Chantel Gould, Scott Bradford, and Paul Gee are all individuals living with heart failure from North Battleford, Saskatoon, Regina, and Moose Jaw. Kelly Johnson, Carrie Heiswick, Amara Paquin, Tara Griffiths, Elise Busha, Amber Gorman are all healthcare staff from Regina and Saskatoon. As well, Lori Garchinsky, Executive Director of Provincial Services, Tertiary Care at the SHA, joins the group in support of the Heart and Stroke Foundation. The group have been having meetings all day today to spread awareness and speak to the importance of public knowledge around heart disease. I've been fortunate enough to meet with Carolyn Sir, Dr. Lavoie, and Scott Bradford, and did so in February during a tour of the Heart Function Clinic at the Regina General Hospital. And during that visit, I was pleased to learn about the important work that this multidisciplinary team does at the clinic for their over 500 patients. And I look forward to meeting with them again later this afternoon. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask all members to welcome these group of guests to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join in with the minister opposite in welcoming this group of patients, caregivers, and healthcare staff that are doing advocacy this week. As the minister said, it was absolutely lovely to meet with Carolyn Sir earlier today. It's always a pleasure to see her. And she was also joined today by Kelly and Scott and Kathy. So it was lovely to hear their individual experience and how the heart function clinics have been instrumental to their role as you know, patients who are recovering from healthcare emergencies and keeping them out of the emergency room. We met earlier with my colleague from Regina Walsh Acres, and it's an absolute pleasure to see them here today. Thank you for your advocacy on behalf of folks all across the province, and I would ask all members to join me in welcoming them to their assembly.
Recognize the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to join with the Minister of Health and the member opposite in welcoming this group, but I would like to particularly single out some very dear friends of mine, Kathy and Scott Bradford, Mr. Speaker. They're a wonderful couple from Moose Jaw, and they're very dear friends. They're together with their daughter, Ada, and the late Marin, who, of course, was near and dear to all of us. Marin was unfortunately lost due to illness a couple of years ago, Mr. Speaker, but the loss is still felt very much through the community. And Kathy and Scott are excellent friends and wonderful citizens of the city of Moose Jaw. Kathy actually was the doula for 2 of my 3 children, and so she has got a special place in my family. So if all members could please join me in welcoming Scott and Kathy to their legislative assembly.
Recognize the Minister of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask for leave for an extended introduction.
Leave has been requested for an extended introduction. Is leave granted? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Agriculture Student Scholarship is an important part of the Government of Saskatchewan's commitment to developing young agriculture leaders. Each year, we recognize 4 emerging leaders in Saskatchewan for their passion and dedication to agriculture. We received many exceptional submissions from students across the province. Mr. Speaker, it is with great pleasure I welcome the winners for the 2024 Saskatchewan Agriculture Scholarships to their legislature. They are seated in your gallery, Mr. Speaker, and I ask when I introduce them that they give a wave so that people will know who they are. Our grand prize winner is Marley Mann from Lloydminster. Marley wrote an exceptional essay about the future of sustainable Saskatchewan agriculture. It emphasized innovation, adaptability, and the overall vitality of the industry. Furthermore, it advocated for building public trust in agriculture through transparency and educational opportunities. Marley will pursue a post-secondary education at the College of Agriculture and Bioresources at the University of Saskatchewan in the fall. Congratulations, Marley. We also have the 3 runner-up recipients with us in their legislature today. Claire Weaver, who is also from Lloydminster. Claire interviewed various agriculture producers in the province for her application. Through her interviews, she learned firsthand the sustainable agriculture practices being undertaken by Saskatchewan producers who are safeguarding the environment while enhancing food security. Claire is currently in her first year at the College of Agriculture and Bioresources at the University of Saskatchewan, focusing on animal welfare. Next, we have Katie Moyle from Hanley. Her essay talked about the past, present, and future of sustainable agriculture in Saskatchewan. She highlighted how Saskatchewan producers have been leaders in sustainable agriculture for generations and continue to innovate and push forward best practices. Katie will attend the College of Agriculture and Bioresources at the University of Saskatchewan, studying agribusiness. Next, we have Maddie Anderson from Rosetown. Her essay focused on environmental sustainability, showcasing how Saskatchewan producers are using new and innovative technologies for soil and water conservation, while highlighting new advancements in precision agriculture. Maddie will attend the College of Agriculture and Bioresources at the University of Saskatchewan, studying agribusiness. I ask all members to join me now in congratulating this year's agriculture student scholarship winners and wish them all the luck as they pursue their career in education in agriculture. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the member from Regina Rosemont.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, it's an honour to join with the Minister to welcome these leaders to their assembly, Mr. Speaker. We all know that agriculture in Saskatchewan is world-class, that we lead the world on so many fronts and so many innovations, and it's because of young people like these, Mr. Speaker, that will continue to lead the world well into the future in such a critical industry and a proud industry in our province. I want to welcome Marley Mann and to offer our congratulations to her for her exceptional work on this front, and I want to welcome the runner-ups as well and to thank them for their exceptional leadership in the province, Claire Weaver, Katie Moyle, and Maddie Anderson. These recipients of the Ag Student Scholarship represent the best of this province. So on behalf of the official opposition, it's my pleasure and my honour to welcome these young leaders to their assembly and to thank them for their service and leadership for many decades moving forward.
Recognize the Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I'd like to join with the Ministers of Health and the member opposite in welcoming some folks from my part of the world who have joined us here at the Legislature today for Heart Failure Awareness Week. I want to welcome Brenda and Byron Hildebrandt. Brenda, of course, is here to share with my colleagues on both sides of the House about a health situation that she had several years back. And so it's a real pleasure. Thank you very much for speaking on behalf of your situation, but also many people around the province and in our community, the Battlefords. Thank you for being here today. So to you and through you, Mr. Speaker, I'd ask all members join me in welcoming Byron and Brenda to their legislature.
Recognize a member from Regina University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you to all members, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome today to the East Gallery 17 grade 4 students from École Laval school I am proud to host in the great constituency of Regina University. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. I look forward to meeting with you after, taking a photo, answering any and all questions that you have. I promise we will all be on exceptionally good behavior for you today. And just really want to welcome these students and their teachers, Madame Lisk and Madame Pain, to their legislature. And I'd ask all members to join me in giving a big round of applause to these wonderful young people seated up there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Mr. Speaker, leave for an extended introduction.
Leave has been requested for an extended introduction. Is leave granted? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very pleased to introduce and welcome a group of future lawyers who are here with us today who are currently articling for the courts or the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, and we had a lovely chat earlier. If you could each give a wave. Amy Miller, Eric Turcotte, Jillian Borrowman, John Pluck, Kelsey Like, Logan Lang, Naomi Aker, Salim Abu Kobi, and Tim Hagstrom. Mr. Speaker, Amy is clerking at the Saskatchewan Court of Appeal. In addition to law, she has degrees in English and Russian literature and culture and plans to join the criminal law practice group at McDougall-Gawley in Regina. Eric is also clerking at the Court of Appeal. He completed his law degree with a French common law minor and will be moving to Ottawa this summer to clerk at the Federal Court of Appeal. Jillian is a former playwright and theatre director. She is articling with the Ministry of Justice and plans to practice with the ministry's civil litigation team. John is also currently articling with the Ministry of Justice and plans to practice there, which is wonderful. Kelsey is clerking at the Court of Appeal. She plans to travel for a bit after completing her articles and will then practice at MLT Aikens in Saskatoon. Logan grew up on a grain farm near Yorkton. He is currently articling in Regina with the Ministry of Justice and plans to practice law in either Regina or Yorkton. Naomi is articling as a clerk for the Court of King's Bench and plans to practice as a Crown Counsel with the Civil Law Branch at the Ministry of Justice. Salim is also articling at the Court of King's Bench and will continue his legal career at Blake's Castles and Graydon in Vancouver. Tim is articling at the Court of Appeal. He will then be taking on the position of National Director of the Runnymede Society, which I addressed recently at the U of S. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, I met with this fine group earlier, and what struck me is the variety and range of their experience, which was familiar. I remember the summer that I was faced with the big decision of whether to pursue law, a master's degree in English or French or journalism, and it was a tough decision, but the articling experience is pivotal, and where you go requires a lot of thought. And as I shared with them, looking back, instead of a rather dry downtown Toronto insurance litigation firm, I wish I had considered a rotation at the ministry as one example where you're exposed to a real range and variety, Mr. Speaker. These students at the Ministry of Justice have experienced 3 months in constitutional law, legislative drafting and services, 3 months in civil law, 1 month at a private firm, 2 months in an alternative rotation of their choice, and sometimes also some time at the court. And Mr. Speaker, we want to continue to attract and retain to the ministry and prosecutions the best and the brightest young lawyers, which is also why we recently announced a new partnership with the University of Saskatchewan College of Law on clinical placements of students during their degree studies with the ministry, with prosecutions, and rural legal aid. And these students can be amazing ambassadors. Mr. Speaker, please join me in welcoming these promising young lawyers to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize a member from Regina Douglas Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my honour to join with the minister in welcoming this esteemed group of individuals to their Legislative Assembly, bordering on a very important precipice in their lives, completing their clerkship, their articles, and moving on to practice, Mr. Speaker. As the minister stated already, a very robust and well-rounded group of individuals with backgrounds that are incredibly interesting. They've spent their time articling within the ministry, where you get a very wide range of experiences, very important range of experiences, or clerking with the judiciary, which is also an incredibly invaluable experience that you will take for the rest of your life. For those who are staying within Saskatchewan, thank you for staying within Saskatchewan. You're about to join a very esteemed bar, Mr. Speaker. There's members on both sides of the house of that bar, so we could speak well to the quality of the individuals. I know I'm biased, but we're very happy to see you join the profession, and we know, as the minister has stated already, that you are at the beginning of what will be a very exciting and a very interesting and challenging career. We all wish you all, no matter where you go, the best. And I ask once again all members to join me in welcoming them to their Legislative Assembly.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to join with the member opposite and the minister in welcoming this group of young lawyers. As one of the few lawyers in the Assembly, I always feel it's good to have more and more lawyers coming in here. So more specifically, I would like to introduce Derek Vanstone, a lawyer who grew up in Saskatoon, is now working for Hatch in Toronto, which is an international engineering firm. He is here for the Food, Fuel and Fertilizer Conference. I first met Derek many years ago when I was a young Conservative and he was a very young Conservative. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all members join me in welcoming Derek Vanstone to the Legislature today.
Recognize a member from Martensville-Warman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you this afternoon in the West Gallery, I'd like to introduce a couple of individuals. The first is Jamie Martins. Jamie, you can just give us a quick wave. Jamie has been a councillor for the City of Martensville since 2012 and currently serves in her role as Deputy Mayor. And she's also served on several FCM committees, Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Alongside Jamie this afternoon, in her first visit to the Legislature, is her daughter, Ariana. And Ariana and I and Jamie have been touring the building this morning, and she's quite in awe. This is, like I said, her first visit. And I'm really hoping it's not her last visit, and I'm really expecting it won't be her last visit, as Jamie is our Saskatchewan Party candidate in Martensville-Blairmore this year. So with that, I'd like everybody in the room to please welcome Jamie and Ariana to their Saskatchewan Legislature.
Presenting petitions. I recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to present the following petition. The folks who signed this petition wish to bring to your attention the Sask Party government voted against meaningful duty to consult legislation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada has called on all levels of government, including provincial governments, to reform laws, policies and strategies that rely on outdated and backwards principle of European sovereignty over Indigenous peoples and lands. And the Sask Party government has never addressed cumulative impacts, yet duty to consult must consider cumulative effects on the ability to practice inherent and treaty rights before approving projects in Saskatchewan. I'll read the prayer. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to enshrine duty to consult into law by enacting the meaningful duty to consult legislation. The folks who signed this petition reside on Yellow Quill First Nation. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present our petition to the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan to suspend the fuel tax. The undersigned residents of the province wish to bring to our attention the following. Saskatchewan people are struggling to keep up with increased costs of food, shelter, and other basic necessities, as wages have not kept up with the rate of inflation. That according to an October 2023 Angus Reid poll, more than 1/3 of people in Saskatchewan are struggling with the cost of living. That the Sask Party government could provide immediate cost of living relief to Saskatchewan families by suspending the 15-cent per litre provincial fuel tax. And they could follow other jurisdictions such as Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba, and Newfoundland who have suspended or reduced their provincial fuel taxes to make life more affordable for the residents of their provinces. I'll read the prayer, Mr. Speaker. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to suspend the collection of the provincial fuel tax from gasoline and diesel for a period of 6 months to help families struggling with the high cost of living. Mr. Speaker, the undersigned residents reside in Prince Albert. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Regina Welsh Acres.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to present a petition calling on the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan to fix the crisis in health care. The undersigned residents of the province of Saskatchewan wish to bring to our attention the following: that there were 951 health care closures across rural Saskatchewan between August 2019 and July 2023. Mr. Speaker, that's a big number that has affected a lot of Saskatchewan people across this province. And when we have, we've lost 21% of nurses in rural and remote Saskatchewan in the last 6 years, there's a problem. And it's the choices that this government is making about how it treats our healthcare professionals, how it makes decisions around healthcare. It has real life impacts for people. We continue to have the longest wait times for knee and hip replacement surgeries. We continue to see Saskatchewan women having to travel to Calgary to get breast cancer care. People deserve to have adequate and accessible health care when and where they need it, Mr. Speaker. I'll read the prayer. We in the prayer that reads as follows respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to immediately address the short staffing crisis in health care and work with health care workers on solutions to improve patient care. Mr. Speaker, the signatories reside in Regina. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon University.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to present our petition calling for pay equity legislation. The undersigned residents would like to bring to our attention the following. That Saskatchewan is one of only 4 provinces not to have implemented pay equity legislation. That Saskatchewan has one of the highest gender wage gaps in Canada, which is the result of systemic gender discrimination in compensation for work that must be corrected with pay equity legislation. That while pay equity advocacy primarily seeks to address gender-based wage discrimination, it must also be mindful of ability, age, identity, and race-based wage discrimination. I'll read the prayer. We in the prayer that reads as follows respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the Government of Saskatchewan to introduce pay equity legislation. The signatories today reside in Weyburn, Redvers, and Fillmore. I do so present.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Utana.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to present a petition calling to address the housing crisis in Saskatchewan, calling for more affordable homes and tenant protections. The undersigned residents wish to bring to your attention the following: that the cost of housing in Saskatchewan has skyrocketed, making it increasingly difficult for many individuals and families to secure stable and affordable housing. Over the past decade, homelessness has surged, pushing people onto the streets. Meanwhile, the government has made drastic cuts to the housing program. The government of Saskatchewan has wasted $596 million on vacant housing units. Some of these remain uninhabitable because of cuts to the maintenance and renovation budget over the last decade. Monthly rent increases and prices in Saskatchewan have also significantly increased, while the wages for Saskatchewan families have remained stagnant. And as a result, people have been forced to cut back on groceries and use the food bank. We, in the prayer that reads as follows, respectfully request that the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan call on the government to immediately implement a comprehensive affordable housing strategy aimed at helping individuals and families in securing stable and affordable housing. The strategy must restore the cuts made to the housing portfolio and invest in the development of affordable and low-income housing units. This petition is signed by residents of Saskatoon. I do so present.
Reading and receiving petitions, statements by members. I recognize a member from Saskatoon Northwest.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday was Yom HaShoah, otherwise known as the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Each year, Jewish communities in Israel and abroad remember the tragic events of the Holocaust. They also remember the heroism of the Jewish resistance that continued to work against Hitler's regime. Mr. Speaker, just last year, the world witnessed the largest collective murder of Jewish people since the Holocaust on October 7th. This event shows how important it is to remember the evil that anti-Semitism continues to perpetrate on the world, and it also highlights the strength of the Jewish people in Israel and in the diasporas abroad. Mr. Speaker, the Holocaust didn't just start with concentration camps. It started when regular people didn't speak out against anti-Semitism, when the Nazi regime was able to weaponize people against each other, when neighbors were turned against one another. We remember each day the rise of anti-Semitism in our country. Mr. Speaker, this day is very personal to me. Mr. Speaker, save for a very few members of my family, almost all of my father's family was exterminated in the death camps of Auschwitz-Birkenau, Flossenburg, Ravensbrück, just to name a few. Only by the grace of God did my father escape, and as a family we remember those who died and what they would have contributed. As members of a democratic society, It's our duty to stand together against fascism and anti-Semitism. There's no place for anti-Semitism or hatred of any kind in Saskatchewan or in this nation. Never forget.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Miigwech, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in honour of Red Dress Day that was held yesterday, May 5th, every year. My colleagues and I joined the many families for the MMIW G2S Plus walks that were held across the province. Red Dress Day is a day to remember and honour our loved ones that have not made it home and to stand with our relatives and communities that have been affected. Mr. Speaker, Red Dress Day is every day for Indigenous women, for our families and our community. It is a reminder of the deep pain and trauma Indigenous communities have endured and continue to endure when those we love have been taken from us. Red Dress Day is also a stark reminder of the ongoing issue surrounding gender-based violence and that we must take a stand for the rights of Indigenous people while underscoring the importance of equality and justice. Mr. Speaker, as a society, we must recognize and address the disproportionate violence and discrimination faced by Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit people. And it is imperative to understand gender-based violence is a result of colonialism, racism, and patriarchy. I ask all members to join me in recognizing Red Dress Day. Gitche miigwech.
Recognize a member from Prince Albert Northcote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government is recognizing May 5th to 11th this year as Heart Failure Awareness Week in Saskatchewan. We have been working with Heart and Stroke to help raise awareness of heart failure and its impact on our province. Heart failure is a serious and growing problem in Canada. In Saskatchewan, nearly 25,000 people are currently living with heart failure, and 3,200 people are diagnosed annually with this complex and incurable condition. Despite these staggering numbers, most people don't understand or know what heart failure is. It is a chronic condition caused by functional or structural problems with the heart. Heart failure places a significant strain on families, caregivers, and people living with this condition, and also places considerable burden on our healthcare system. Heart Failure Awareness Week is an opportunity to learn about heart failure, the signs and symptoms, how to reduce risk, and how to better support those living with this complex and incurable condition so they can live longer. I am pleased to share these messages to raise awareness among my colleagues and people right across Saskatchewan so we may better understand heart failure. I encourage everyone to visit Heart and Stroke's website at heartandstroke.ca to find out more. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Today marks the beginning of National Nursing Week. I rise in honour of the more than 11,000 nurses in Saskatchewan who are tirelessly committed to taking care of patients and their families every single day. The theme of this year's Nursing Week is Changing Lives, Shaping Tomorrow. When we look to the future of nursing in this province, it's clear that major changes are needed. Nurses in Saskatchewan are overworked and undervalued, working in crowded ERs with plummeting staff numbers and an over-reliance on travel nurses. The Saskatchewan Union of Nurses has been crystal clear. Meaningful change depends on nurses being at the table. This should be a no-brainer, Mr. Speaker. The nurses are the ones on the front lines. The nurses are the ones who see the worsening cracks in the system. The nurses are the ones who know what needs to be done. And yet for over a year now, the Sask Party government has refused to put together a nursing task force to get to the root of the issue. This National Nursing Week, we must honour nurses by giving them a voice when it comes to the crisis that's hitting them so hard. I ask all members to join me in thanking Saskatchewan nurses for their dedicated service and calling on the government to assemble a nursing task force. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon, Churchill-Wildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Saskatchewan will now have access to an innovative new mammography camera at the Irene and Leslie Dubé Centre of Care Breast Health Centre. The machine, called a hologic 3-dimensions mammography system, has curved paddles to make the test more comfortable for patients and creates a sharper image for better diagnosis capabilities. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to say that the partnership between the Saskatchewan Health Authority, the Saskatoon City Hospital Foundation, and their donors resulted in the machine being ordered and installed within 6 weeks. With this new machine, the hospital can reduce wait times and help with early detection and prevention measures. Enabling greater access to health care for all residents remains a priority for this government, and I'm very happy that residents of Saskatoon and surrounding communities will now have access to this machine. Innovation continues to be part of our strategy to accelerate access to breast health procedures, from mammography to surgery and further care that a patient might need. On behalf of my constituents in Saskatoon, Churchill, Wildwood, and the Greater Saskatoon area, thank you to all involved in the procurement of this important device. And a further thank you to the donors who continue to contribute to Saskatchewan's healthcare system. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Recognize a member from Arm River. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the future is bright in this province. Saskatchewan's youth, like the 4 Ag Scholarship winners here today, will be key to the future success of our agriculture industry as the world looks to us for sustainable food, fuel, and fertilizer they need. This year, under the Sustainable Canadian Agricultural Partnership, the scholarships were increased to $3,000 and $6,000. The goal of these scholarships is to bring attention to the many opportunities in the agriculture and agri-food sector and encourage the province's youth to work in this industry, help tell our story, and build public trust. Applicants were required to produce a science-based 3-minute video or write a 1,000-word essay highlighting the importance of farming and environmental sustainability. Applicants also had to provide a conditional acceptance letter from a post-secondary institution, as well as a letter of reference. There were 49 applications, Mr. Speaker, this year. Mr. Speaker, these winners here today show exceptional knowledge and expertise and are well on their way to making the ag sector in this province even stronger. Marley, Claire, Katie, and Maddie, on behalf of all members, we are so proud of your hard work, your dedication, and your accomplishments thus far, and we are so pleased to support you on your post-secondary journey and wish you continued success in your bright future. Thank you. Recognize a member from Lloydminster.
Mr. Speaker, the other day in estimates, when the Premier talked about the NDP leader attending the Trudeau campaign school in Ottawa, she got quite defensive and said, quote, "The Premier knows so very well that this was not a campaign school." Well, the problem is, Mr. Speaker, we have the evidence. We have the slides from the NDP leader's presentation. Here's the title of the slides, and I quote, "Defeating Conservatives in Saskatchewan." Guest speaker, Carla Beck. That sounds an awful lot like a campaign school to me, Mr. Speaker. And worst of all, her presentation was about defeating the one federal party that will end the carbon tax, which makes it very clear. The NDP support Trudeau, they support Singh, and they support the carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, Saskatchewan people overwhelmingly oppose Trudeau and his carbon tax. Yet this NDP leader flew to Ottawa in the middle of the legislative session, not just to attend, but to lead a session at the Trudeau campaign school. How could she do that to Saskatchewan?
I would like to caution the member on that member statement. There's a lot of things that were said that it's not allowed. You're talking about party deliberations. You name the member by her name rather than by her position. So on the one part, I'd like you to withdraw and apologize when you mentioned the member's name rather than by her title. I'm asking you to withdraw and apologize for that.
Apologize.
Question period. I recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker,
last Thursday, the Sask Party voted unanimously to defeat our motion to suspend the fuel tax and give Saskatchewan families a break. Mr. Speaker, does the Premier care to tell us why?
Recognize the Premier.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. The entire gas tax, plus that fund is added to, Mr. Speaker, make up the highways budget in the province of Saskatchewan. That's the highways. That's the highways investment that we make to ensure that our commodities are able to find their way to port position, Mr. Speaker. It's also the investment that we make in safer highways, safer intersections, Mr. Speaker, because it's our families that are traveling down those very same roads, Mr. Speaker, and we think that that investment is most certainly warranted. I understand why the members opposite don't correlate the gasoline tax with the investment in highways, because quite frankly, under their administration, they did not invest the entire amount into highways, Mr. Speaker. What they did is they took those dollars and invested them in other areas of government. It is a fact, Mr. Speaker, and you can check the previous budgets and public accounts on that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, when it comes to affordability, I talk day in, day out about the $2 billion in each and every budget that is afforded to the people of this province, families of this province, due to the strength of our growing and vibrant economy. The tax affordability checks that went out last year, Mr. Speaker, to each and every resident over the age of 18, Mr. Speaker, and the savings in carbon tax on our home heating, natural gas and electricity, which is a larger number, Mr. Speaker, a larger number than what the Leader of the Opposition is advocating for.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Sask Party have shown through their actions how completely out of touch they are with the reality that Saskatchewan families are facing. 57% of people in this province struggling just to pay for groceries. And instead of using their power to offer them some relief, the Sask Party used their majority to say no to suspending the gas tax. Mr. Speaker, that tells you everything that you need to know about how out of touch this Sask Party government has become, and why, Mr. Speaker, it's time for a change. Premiers in Alberta and in Manitoba have provided this relief to people in their province. Why does the Premier think that Saskatchewan families don't deserve the same?
Recognize the Premier.
Asked and answered, Mr. Speaker, and what I would say and ask of the Leader of the Opposition and all members opposite is, in the very same vein, why did they vote against the budget? $2 billion in affordability measures in this year's budget voted against by the NDP, Mr. Speaker. In this budget was the enabling legislation to ensure that Saskatchewan families are not going to pay carbon tax on their home heating natural gas and their home heating electricity, unlike anywhere else in the nation. Why did you vote against that savings for Saskatchewan families, Mr. Speaker? We're going to continue to ensure that we have a budget that's put forward that allows Saskatchewan cities, Regina in the budget documents themselves, being identified as the most affordable city to live in the nation of Canada, Mr. Speaker. We're going to ensure that that is the case with the $2 billion that are again in this year's budget. We're going to ensure that we have a strong and growing and vibrant economy so that we can continue to make the investments in our classrooms, in our healthcare system, and in our communities.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this government is failing to deliver on the cost of living, and they're failing to deliver when it comes to providing care to the most vulnerable. Today, we're joined by families, by individuals living with disabilities, their caregivers, and their loved ones. And they're here today to tell their stories about this government's failure to provide care for adults in this province living with intellectual disabilities. Tara Jo Cadlick is here to tell the story of her brother, Corey. Corey passed away just weeks ago. And last year, Corey spent 10 months locked in a dementia ward because of the lack of appropriate care placement in the community. His family says, Mr. Speaker, that he never recovered from this experience. What does the Premier have to say to this family, to Tara Jo, and to her family about why they're failing so badly?
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
I welcome Tara Jo, and very sorry to hear of the passing of Corey. I know this, I'd heard about this case many months ago, I should say, Mr. Speaker. I know there sometimes is challenges in finding placements for group homes for highly specialized needs on the medical intervention side of things. Mr. Speaker, the health minister and myself have recently met with parents who are interested in having a group home available for those who have those extremely high medical needs that it's probably not the best setting for them in a long-term care home or in a hospital, for example. They might be younger than all the other residents, and it might not be the best spot for them, Mr. Speaker. So the government is actually looking at the possibility of that. There's examples in other provinces that the Ministries of Health and Social Services are also looking at to better meet the needs of clients who don't necessarily shouldn't be in a hospital setting.
Recognize the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this isn't a one-off failure. This is a system failure. Corey had Down syndrome. He was 41 years old. He loved dinosaurs, Jurassic Park, burgers, and spending time on his dad's farm near Davidson. And he had health needs that weren't being met in the community. Tara Jo fought tooth and nail for Corey to live somewhere where he felt safe. And he finally ended up in the family's care. From there, Tara and the family had to fight every day to get basic help. How is this acceptable in Saskatchewan in 2024?
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, in terms of group homes, we've been able to increase the budget. There's been growing need, of course, Mr. Speaker, in our province. Since we've formed government, the disability program area, for example, has gone up by $248 million. That's a 348% increase, including in this budget. This government has also brought forward individualized funding to fill gaps in programming that the traditional group homes may not fill the needs. So, Mr. Speaker, we're actively looking at ways to support those with the highest complex medical needs in our province, and that work will continue.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Tara Jo and her family did everything that they possibly could to get the support that her brother needed. But the supports available to them just weren't good enough. And Corey suffered needlessly, and Corey's family has suffered needlessly as a result. We're joined today by many fierce advocates who don't want to be here. They wish they didn't have to fight so hard. Brenda and Candace Olson have joined us together with their son and brother Jerome. Jerome lives with cerebral palsy. He's been in and out of homes. His family is tired. Jerome is back living with family because they feel they're out of options within the system. We're also joined by the gardeners who care for Matthew Brandon of the For the Love of Matthew page, who described the lack of support from the ministry in their time with them over the years as, quote, a living nightmare. When will this government invest in sufficient supports for those living with developmental disabilities in Saskatchewan and start to lift these families up?
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. In my time as the minister, I've been able to meet with several of these families and work with them. I know the ministry works very hard to find good placements or good situations. Sometimes they may not be ideal based on what is happening throughout the system, Mr. Speaker, but I would note the increases we've been able to make, this government's been able to make in the CLSD area, 348% increase, as well as this budget, Mr. Speaker, 10 new group homes, Mr. Speaker. The member from Westview and Eastview were just recently in Saskatoon with myself to open with Elmwood new facilities. 3 new facilities, 2 new were announced as well, Mr. Speaker. There's certainly more work to do in this, but we're able to do that with a strong growing economy to help find the best placement possible. It may not be perfect at the time, but we'll continue, the ministry will continue to work with families to find an ideal situation going forward.
Recognize the member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, these are not new issues, and this government is moving at a snail's pace to bridge these gaping chasms. The lack of coordination between health and social services is failing individuals living with developmental disabilities in this province. Most homes have no nursing care at all. The lack of collaboration means an unacceptably low quality of care. The management of health issues often falls to exhausted family members. Individuals like Tracy Belial, who is here today with her son Brandon, who requires a high level of support. He's been on a wait list for a group home for over a decade. Nothing else available. Brandon, who is a social and bright young man, was recently placed in a totally unacceptable situation with 4 nonverbal seniors. Medication errors and a lack of suitable care led Tracy to pull him from that placement on the advice of Brandon's doctor. Does the minister really think that the status quo is good enough?
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
Speaker, in terms of the group homes, I want to go on record and thank so much the group homes and all the DSWs that work, disability support workers who do great work each and every day and sometimes in very difficult cases. So I certainly appreciate that effort with the dozens of group homes that the ministry has contracts with and good work happens every day, Mr. Speaker. And just again in this budget there's been increases to wages, and that's on top of several in the past few years since I've been the minister and previous ministers before that. But also on the operational side, this budget came forward with the operational oversight unit to work with third parties, to work with our CBOs to ensure there's governance structure in place, as well as on the operations side as well to make sure our most vulnerable people in our province are looked after. That's on top of increases, Mr. Speaker. Granted, I know there is more work to do in this area, but I want to continue this work as we go forward.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the minister touts increases. I can't stress enough that this sector is in crisis. The auditor reported on this back in 2021. She identified risks, a lack of oversight, a lack of standards. She made 9 recommendations, and the last that we were updated, none of them were fully implemented. I raised these issues with the former Minister of Social Services going back to 2021, how the lack of training and wages for staff impacts those living with disabilities in these group home settings, and it's only gotten worse since then. A turnover rate of 30% means that individuals will have over 1,000 different people providing intimate and personal care over their lifetime. A revolving door of care is not only undignified, it's dangerous. Will the minister finally listen to these families, take the crisis in the sector seriously, and stop with the lip service and the slogans? Stop talking about making Saskatchewan the best place in Canada to live with disabilities and make it happen.
Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
As I mentioned before, Mr. Speaker, I have met with many of these families that the member has brought forward. We thank them for being here to, again, tell their story. I think that's important to keep that on the attention of myself and the government. But I think this government has acted. Is there certainly more to do? I've talked about the increase on the wages side, but also on the capital side, the operational side for our valued CBO partners. And again, I want to thank each and every one of those. And the member's right. Some of the DSWs, the disability support workers, are they almost become family to many of the people that they do look after, and we thank them for their work each and every day for doing that. And so, again, we partner with third parties to deliver good service. Nearly $500 million in wages just this year to the CBO sector, 3% lift. So. There's certainly more to do. I acknowledge that, Mr. Speaker. I think this government has been committed, and it's shown that through the last several budgets.
Recognize a member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
A 3% lift that may not even make it to those frontline workers. Thank them in action, not words. Mr. Speaker, then there are the families that can't get access to institutionalized care or a group home who are left to go it alone. Families like Kathy Chartier's, whose daughter Rebecca has low-functioning autism and the mental capacity of a 5-year-old. She requires one-on-one 24/7 care, but Kathy doesn't receive close to that. She gets 30 hours per week and has to fill in the gaps at great personal and financial cost. She doesn't get the support she needs from this ministry through self-directed funding to provide a safe situation for her daughter. She's told that a group home waitlist is long. She and her husband are growing older. They worry about what will happen to Rebecca when they're not around anymore. When will the minister put in place the supports that families like Kathy and Rebecca need and deserve? Finally, will the minister set up follow-up meetings with the families that have attended here today so that their stories can fuel true action? Here.
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
Well, again, I would submit to the member there has been significant investments in this area, 348% increase in the years since this government has had the honour to serve in this great province, Mr. Speaker. So there is self-directed funding that is new to this government. CLSD, the folks in that part of the ministry do great work, and it's sometimes challenging work, and there is always work to do. And again, I met with the Push families, as was mentioned by the member opposite, to try and find a way to fill some of the gaps that are out there. The self-directed funding is part of that. The increased funding to group homes is part of that as well. On the wage side, on the operational side, the operational oversight unit is a very important part of those commitments. But, Mr. Speaker, there's more to do, and it's particularly those who have very high medical needs, and we want to find the right setting for them.
Recognize member from Regina Elphinstone Centre.
Mr. Speaker, on the record, I'll ask for a commitment from the minister to meet with each of these families in follow-up meetings so that their stories can fuel change. Hear, hear.
Recognize the Minister of Social Services.
Again, Mr. Speaker, met with several of these families and would be honoured to do so once again at their convenience.
Recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, this government is failing to deliver in social services, and they're failing to deliver when it comes to health care. We hear story after story from nurses and healthcare workers about the challenges facing our hospitals. $139 million spent on contract nursing by December, fire code violations and stop-the-line procedures in emergency rooms. Healthcare workers have the answers, but this tired and out-of-touch government isn't listening. It's Nursing Week, and the minister has the opportunity to do the right thing. Will he finally say yes to a nursing task force?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Health.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as part of Nursing Week, National Nursing Week, and including here in Saskatchewan, we're very grateful and want to extend our appreciation and gratitude to all the nurses of all designations, 19,000 nurses across this province, Mr. Speaker, and a growing number of nurses here in Saskatchewan serving the people right across our great province. And Mr. Speaker, we are committed to creating more opportunities for nurses here in Saskatchewan. It's why we have been meeting with them regularly, meeting with frontline healthcare providers, meeting with the unions, Mr. Speaker, working to establish more training seats, for example, Mr. Speaker, to create more training opportunities here in Saskatchewan so that we can train more of those very valuable nurses of all designations, and then in addition to that, get them hired into our facilities right across this province, Mr. Speaker. That's the level of commitment that we have shown in the past, Mr. Speaker. We'll continue to collaborate very closely with nurses and continue to do this in the future, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. Recognize a member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Mr. Speaker, listening to local voices is what's needed to fix the problems in healthcare. But this tired and out-of-touch government doesn't listen. That's why emergency room nurses have to send open letters to the minister's office, and it's why nurses have been asking for a nursing task force for over a year. Saskatchewan people deserve a government that listens to frontline workers, not lobbyists and consultants. Why won't the minister call for a nursing task force? How will he get to the root of the retention issues in healthcare?
Recognize the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we have been working to listen to nurses, to hear from them, to meet with them whenever possible, Mr. Speaker, to not only hear from them directly some of the challenges that are out there in our healthcare system, but also the solutions, Mr. Speaker, to those challenges. For example, as we've talked about for some time now around challenges at St. Paul's Hospital in Saskatoon, we've been working very closely. I have met personally with nurses there. I've been to St. Paul's, Mr. Speaker. We've asked Mr. Speaker, that SHA senior leadership be engaged with them. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, some of those ideas have been brought forward as part of the Saskatoon Capacity Pressure Action Plan, and ideas that have been coming directly from frontline healthcare providers, including nurses, including doctors, including others in leadership positions there, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue that engagement and make sure that we are listening to frontline healthcare providers, hearing from them the challenges, but also the solution, and working closely with them to implement those solutions, Mr. Speaker.
Recognize a member from Regina University.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This tired and out-of-touch government is failing to deliver basic healthcare services to people in this province, and they're failing to deliver support for vulnerable people as well. They're also failing to create good jobs and to grow this economy. Let's just look at the value of merchandise exports. For 11 consecutive months, the value of merchandise exports in Saskatchewan has fallen year over year. Job growth is anemic, corporate profits are falling, and shortly government tax revenues will be falling too. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Premier and his ministers spend thousands of dollars flying around the world, but they're delivering less this year than they were last year, and those are the facts. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister, why didn't he bring up that fact this morning in his fireside chat with the Premier and former Prime Minister Harper?
Recognize Minister of Trade and Export Development.
Well, I can't tell you how happy I am to talk about the economy here in Saskatchewan, Mr. Speaker. $78 billion of GDP. Those numbers just came out, I believe, last week. Second in the entire country in growth. Year before, over a 6% growth rate in our GDP, Mr. Speaker, leading the Canada. Our exports are up nearly $50 billion this year, and I can tell you a big part of the discussion today at the Food, Fuel and Fertilizer Summit put on by the Sask Chamber of Commerce was about how we keep that momentum going, how we continue to grow our exports, $50 billion this year. And keep in mind, in the final year of the NDP government, which was probably their best year, exports were $16 billion, Mr. Speaker. $50 billion of exports on $78 billion of GDP is how this government is able to pay for all of the services that are provided. It's how the budget has gone from $7 billion a year when we formed government to nearly $20 billion a year this year, Mr. Speaker. Growth is what pays for all of the services that we so value in this province, and that's what we're committed to.
Recognize a member from Regina University.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk about those StatsCan numbers, because you know what they show? Ag, down. Forestry, down. Mining, down. Oil and gas, down. Construction, down. Transportation, down. Let's talk about that, Mr. Speaker. And let's also talk about this government's contract with Stephen Harper. Every year, we pay Calgary-based Harper & Associates $250,000 every year to help this struggling government. Almost $1 million since this Premier came to office. And when we FOI'd the contract with Harper & Associates, Mr. Speaker, can you guess what happened? It came back redacted. Almost every detail withheld for the actual description of work that the taxpayers of Saskatchewan are paying Harper & Associates to do. How does the minister justify this total lack of transparency?
Hear, hear. Recognize the Minister of Trade and Export Development.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I wish that member had listened to the discussion today that occurred at the Food, Fuel and Fertilizer Summit put on by the Sask Chamber of Commerce, because what she would have heard from business leaders, from partners, from stakeholders, including chambers of commerce across the province, are the vital importance, Mr. Speaker, of international engagement, about why our direct engagement with leaders around the world has resulted in literally hundreds of millions of dollars of opportunities for our companies to do business, which results in tens of thousands of jobs here, Mr. Speaker. The fact that their export numbers were only $16 billion in their best year, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the fact that this doesn't just happen. And we know it doesn't just happen because it never happened when they were government. We need to engage. We need to support Saskatchewan. We need to work with our companies. We need to sell the province. That's what we're committed to doing, and it's showing real results.
Recognize a member from Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The addictions crisis in our province continues to take lives. Later this week, the coroner will release new overdose numbers that will show what we already know. This is a crisis out of control. Last year, we set a record for overdose deaths, Mr. Speaker. We're on track to set another record this year. This government touts its treatment-oriented model of care, but you can't check into treatment if you've died of an overdose. Right. How many more months of record deaths will it take before the Sask Party changes course and provides the evidence-based supports people need to stop the harm?
Hear, hear.
Recognize Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As I've said before, and I will say again, every loss of life due to an overdose is a tragedy, and our condolences are extended to every family that's impacted, because we know that addiction reaches beyond just the individual, Mr. Speaker, and it impacts families and communities as well. We also know, Mr. Speaker, that the best way to prevent overdoses is to help individuals overcome those addictions. And we are doing just that with our action plan on mental health and addictions, Mr. Speaker. We are adding 500 addictions treatment spaces. We are making it easier for people to access those spaces, and we are giving people the services and supports that they need through recovery-oriented systems of care to ensure that they can live healthy, safe lives in recovery. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ministerial statements, introduction of bills, presenting reports by standing and special committees, orders of the day. Premier has requested leave to make condolences. Is leave granted? Carried.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And there's a number of condolence motions of former MLAs that we will make here today. And I would just offer, in the case of the first MLA, previous MLA from Shelburne Torch River, in fact, the first two MLAs, but starting with Mr. Lloyd Muller, who passed away this past June of this past year. Lloyd was the MLA from 1982, I believe, until the election in the early 90s in the constituency of Shelburne Torch River. Mr. Speaker, I was through the 80s of when I was yet in high school, and but he did serve, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with respect to the constituency of Shelburne, actually going over from Canwood right over to Smeaton and out to Choiceland and in that area. Mr. Speaker, I do recall Lloyd being very active in the community in his involvement with the 4-H, being active in the community with his involvement with a number of organizations, giving back to his community long before he was elected to the floor of this legislature. In fact, in the late 80s, would have been the first time that I, as a part of a class trip, and I think there was a class that was here today, and we see that often, we were part of a class trip from Shelburne, about 4-hour drive one way down here, where we came, visited the legislature, said hello to Lloyd, had our photo on the staircase, and then off to visit the Science Centre as well. So that experience has been happening for many decades, as it turns out, Mr. Chair. But I would just offer maybe a couple of more personal comments with respect to Lloyd. In addition to the first time I was in this building, Lloyd was our MLA in the area. I did not return to this building until I was elected. I was in it once prior to being elected. But on the morning after the 2011 election, when I, about 7:30 in the morning, I was up fairly early. I went down to our campaign office. I was feeling pretty good, as we had just successfully won the honour to form government again in 2011. And for me, it was the first time that I had been elected Mr. Deputy Speaker, and who was at the campaign office at about 7 or 7:30 in the morning, but was Lloyd Muller. And I was going to start cleaning the place up a little bit, and so we sat and had a coffee, and Lloyd had offered a couple of pieces of advice that I've carried with me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The first was just this. He said, you know, you'll find your way down to Regina, and there's a lot of things that are going to be happening. And he said, you have a good moral compass. He says, you've been raised in the community of Shelburne, and he said, trust your gut. When it comes to various things that are happening, he said, if your gut doesn't say it's the right thing, he said, voice your opinion and certainly make your decisions accordingly. He said, it won't steer you wrong. And I have carried that with me. I like to think I carried that with me all of my life, but it certainly has given me the confidence to ensure that I and trusting my gut instincts, Mr. Deputy Chair, when it comes to all decisions and all conversations that I'm a part of and have throughout my political career. The second piece of advice that Mr. Muller had offered was about the pace at which things happen in government. And he said again, you were raised on a farm, and he says, yeah, I've seen you working and volunteering in the community, and he said you've been part of the business community. He said you like to make things happen. You like to see things through and see some action happening and get to the end of whatever the project is. And we had done a number of volunteer projects. A concession building, a 3,000 or 4,000 foot concession building at our sports grounds that Lloyd watched. I had been involved with significant upgrades to our hockey arena, and we did it in the same way that every community does, is you get together, you fundraise, and you go and build the thing. And so Lloyd's advice was, government doesn't move that quickly. And he said, you're going to have to learn how to accept that. And he said, there's a reason why it doesn't move that quickly. He said it doesn't get down the wrong roads too quickly either, just simply because it rolls along. And he said you can really think of government as this very, very large wheel. And he said if you're good at what you do, and you understand that government doesn't move too quickly, he said you may be able to find yourself in a position within the government or on the floor of this assembly to stand to the one side of that wheel, and you might be able to nudge it a little bit in the direction that you and your caucus colleagues would like to see it go, or you might be able to at times stand on the other side of that wheel and you might be able to nudge it a little bit so that it can change course to some degree if that's what you believe the best interest of your constituents and more broadly the people of Saskatchewan want or desire at that point in time. But he said, for goodness sakes, don't stand in front of that wheel and hold your hand up and try to stop it, because you should know that it's run over a lot better men than you. Mr. Speaker, it's a piece of advice that I remember, and I remember quite fondly. I went back and looked at Lloyd's maiden speech from June 21st of 1982, and it'll be a little bit of a maybe comparison to the speech that I will bring up in our next individual. But Lloyd, as I said, he was part of a leader in our 4-H community in Shelburne, and he very much was an advocate for agriculture during his time in private life, his time in public life, and then his time when he returned to private life, whether it be crop production, whether it be livestock production. But he understood very much that agriculture was a very spinal cord of the economy, not just in Roston Shelburne, but across the province of Saskatchewan. In his maiden speech, he made some comments with respect to the crow rate benefit. There's something we haven't heard about in decades. The crow rate benefit, and in 1982, the importance of that crow rate benefit to Saskatchewan producers. That has changed to some degree as we see the significant investment in value-added agriculture production and some of what is happening in, for example, this province increasingly exporting canola oil as opposed to canola seed. In the future, I think you'll see pea proteins and pulse proteins as opposed to peas and lentils, Mr. Speaker. And that all started back in the days of the crow rate benefit, which was there to actually subsidize some of the freight that Saskatchewan farmers and agricultural producers were experiencing. Lloyd had also made a number of comments around tourism and the importance of tourism to the area, with the national park to the north, the great number of regional parks that we have across the constituency, the opportunities that we have with all of the lakes in the area. And I know in retired life, Lloyd spent a lot of time at Larson Lake, a small lake actually just outside of one of our PFRA, what used to be the PFRA pastures there, small quiet lake, and he spent a lot of time there with his wife Doreen fishing and enjoying the quiet of retired life. So agriculture, tourism, but also some discussion around hunting season and the vast wildlife reserve that we have throughout the Forest Fringe area. And so things haven't changed a whole lot in that area. I'd say they have changed on many fronts, but definitely the priorities of what is now largely the Rosthern, Shelbrook, or Saskatchewan Rivers constituency. Back then was Shelbrook Torch River constituency. Agriculture is still very much the spinal cord of the industry in the area. Some mention of timber, very much part of the economy in the area. Tourism, an important piece in the area, and certainly some of the recreation opportunities that we have in the hunting, the sphere of hunting and outfitting and fishing. If you're a better fisherman than I, Mr. Deputy Chair, as my fishing really consists of the great opportunity to wash off my fish hooks in the lake. Mr. Speaker, I would close with the following motion of condolence. That this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and expresses its grateful appreciation of the contribution that he made to his community, to his constituency, and to the province. Lloyd John Muller, who passed away on June the 27th, 2023, at the age of 86. He served as a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1982 until 1991, representing the constituency of Shelbrook Torch River for the Progressive Conservative Party. Mr. Muller served as Deputy Speaker of the Legislative Assembly from 1982 until 1985, and again from 1986 until 1991. Mr. Muller, who was born in Prince Albert on June the 21st, 1937, grew up in Parkside, Saskatchewan. In 1958, he married Doreen Rask, and the couple settled in the same region where they established a family farm and farmed until 1967, at which time they relocated to a new farm in Foxdale. Mr. Muller was very active in his community throughout his life, particularly in his local 4-H club, and prior to his time in the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Muller also served as the Reeve of the rural municipality of Shelbrook. Mr. Muller is survived and sadly missed by his wife Doreen, his children Lyle, Terry, Tracy, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to the members of the bereaved family. I so move.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honour to join with the Premier and support this condolence motion for Mr. Lloyd Muller. Lloyd Muller was an MLA and served in this Assembly from 1982 to 1991 and represented the constituency of Shelbrook Torch River. And would be familiar with the role that you're seated in, as well as he served as Deputy Speaker for several years, Mr. Speaker. He was born in PA and grew up in Parkside and was quite active in his community, Mr. Speaker, and also served, in addition to those community roles, and being an MLA, served as Reeve of the RM of Shelbrook as well. It is never something we do alone in serving the Assembly here, Mr. Speaker, and so on behalf of the official opposition, we want to thank Mr. Muller for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and also pass along our condolences to his family, his wife Doreen, and his children and their families. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Prince Albert, Northcote.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to briefly join with the Premier and the member opposite in recognizing and expressing gratitude for Mr. Lloyd Muller's service to his community, his constituency, and our province. Most of my memories of Mr. Muller are from my youth. Often we'd see him at the local skating rink with his sons who played hockey with my brother over the years. But I especially remember him from when he was the leader of the 4-H, Foxdale 4-H Beef Club. At that time, I was a member of the Wild Rose 4-H Beef Club. And every year at the regional show and sale in Prince Albert, we would all get together, and the dads were in charge. And great fun was held by all of us, because we got to get away with quite a bit more than we would have, I think, with the mums in charge. And I remember Mr. Muller, he really enjoyed that time. I would like to express my deepest condolences to Mr. Muller's family, and may you hold all of your memories dear in your hearts, and may they give you comfort in your time of sorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Is the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I would move on with another condolence motion, not moving too far away geographically, sticking with the constituency of Shelburne-Torch River and the individual that followed Mr. Muller to take a seat in this Assembly on behalf of the constituents of Torch River, and that's Mr. Jack Fenton Langford. I don't remember Jack personally. I didn't know Jack. However, Mr. Chair, I did pull also his maiden speech, December 9th of 1991, and I looked at a number of the themes that Jack had brought up. I do remember when he was elected. However, I just completed my grade 12 year and was entering the workforce. And I do remember when he was elected, and partially I'll maybe explain how through a story that I will close with before I make the motion. But I was looking at Mr. Langford's maiden speech on December the 9th of 1991, and very much had a similar tone as Mr. Muller's speech in 1982, previous, recognizing the importance of agriculture to the economy and communities across that constituency. He speaks to people that he had talked to in many of the communities throughout that campaign, and how they viewed some of the challenges that they were facing in agriculture, but also some of the solutions that they may have suggested. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned under Mr. Muller the crow right. As I was reading Mr. Langford's speech about 10 years later, 9 years later, he mentions the revamp of the programs GRIP and NISA, and you remember those programs as well. Again, after in 1993, I had found my way to the College of Agriculture at the University of Saskatchewan, and we had much discussion on those two programs in the years ahead following 1991. But again, Mr. Langford, spoke very in depth with respect to the impact agriculture had and the people that he had met throughout his campaign, and I know throughout his term of service. He spoke very much, on behalf of what was the largest and continues to be the largest economic driver in this particular part of the province, and that is primary agriculture, agri-food production. He also mentioned tourism of Christopher Lake and other areas. He mentioned forestry in the choice land areas, Pataquid areas, and the mill operating in and around the Prince Albert area, Mr. Speaker. How I heard of Mr. Langford, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was yes, through watching the election transpire in 1991, and the New Democrats, there was a change in government in that year, obviously, as we all know, and Mr. Langford replaced Mr. Muller, whom I formerly spoke about in our particular area, which really mirrored what happened in largely across the province. But I would say back in that day, and I have this memento on my fridge, it was a few years later, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I have not mine, but I have an NDP membership receipt, Mr. Speaker. It was sold in and around this time of the election of Mr. Langford. It was my grandfather's. My grandfather, who passed away in 2012 at the age of 96 years old, but in the mid-90s, he was an NDP supporter, in a large part, and we had great discussions around this, in a large part due to the Canadian Wheat Board, and his grandfather having to sell his wheat and canola for about 50 cents, and then other folks could sell it for $2 in the spring. That was his experience, and that was the experience of people back in the day. Mr. Speaker, and I think that experience is very, very real. All politics aside, that experience was very, very real, and you see some of that in Mr. Langford's recognition of the importance of agriculture to the constituents of Shelburne-Torch River at that period of time. And as I say, my grandfather was one of them. That likely, I don't know, and I didn't ask him, but we had enough discussions that I can say with a fair degree of certainty that he was probably a supporter and put an X by Mr. Langford's name. Mr. Speaker, I would take the opportunity as the current MLA of part of that area to thank Mr. Langford and Mr. Langford's family, pardon me, for supporting him in his service to the people of Shelburne-Torch River in this assembly. Mr. Speaker, I will move the motion that this assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this assembly and expresses its grateful appreciation of the contribution that he made to his community, to his constituency, and to the province. John, or also known as Jack Fenton Langford, who passed away on February the 25th, 2024 at the age of 80. He served as a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1991 until 1999. He represented the constituencies of Shelburne-Torch River and Saskatchewan Rivers for the New Democratic Party. Mr. Langford, who was born in Kalina, Saskatchewan on February the 18th of 1944, he was raised in the Shelburne-Torch River area, and he received his education at Composite High School in Prince Albert. Prior to his tenure in the Legislative Assembly, Mr. Langford farmed in the Spruce Home area, but throughout his life, he also worked variously in road construction as a pulp haul truck driver, as a heavy equipment operator, and as a realtor. Over the years, Mr. Langford served his community as a president of both the Spruce Home Sports Association and the Allingly Rural Crime Watch. He was also a charter member of the Highway 355 Lions Club and was actively involved in the Spruce Home Beavers, pardon me. Mr. Langford is survived and sadly missed by his children, Sherry, Kim, and Trevor, their mother, Marilyn, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to the members of the bereaved family. I so move.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honored to join with the Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Mr. Jack Langford. Jack served as an MLA in this Assembly from 1991 until 1998 and represented the constituencies of Shelburne-Torch River and Sask Rivers for the NDP. Mr. Langford farmed in the Spruce Home area and has been actively involved in his community. He was a hard worker and avid outdoorsman, enjoying hunting, fishing, ice fishing, gardening, and camping. I'm also told that he had a love for sports, especially a love for our Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Blue Jays, and the Edmonton Oilers, who I'm sure he would be very proud of this year. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the official opposition, we want to thank Mr. Langford for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and pass along condolences to his children, Sherry, Kim, and Trevor, and their mother, Marilyn, and their families, and thank him for his time serving here, Mr. Speaker.
I recognize the member from Saskatchewan Rivers.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. I also would like to recognize Jack and extend my condolences. John Jack Langford was the youngest of 5 boys raised by his parents, Jenny and George Langford. Perhaps this is where Jack received his training in competitiveness, determination, good work ethic, and integrity, guided by his parents in this very lively household of 5 boys. Jack lived into the first week of his 80th year. He found it difficult to move into the city and leave Langford Road in the Spruce Home area in beautiful Saskatchewan Rivers, where his other family members resided, brothers Tom, Little George, and their families. They all lived close by. It was no wonder that Jack was interested in genealogy and held the family reunion right at his farm. Brother Tom lived on the original Langford homestead. Jack and Marilyn raised their 3 children, Sherry, Kim, and Trevor, who later blessed them with 4 grandchildren to love and attend their sports activities, which Jack so enjoyed. He tried to go to everything. It was noted Jack was a good provider, working in many different fields, driving truck, forestry, farming, real estate, to name a few. Jack was noted for his kindness, his good nature, and love for community and country. He started into politics as the sign man for the MLA, Ted Bowerman. It was noted everything had to be precise with the 2x4s. Jack was first elected in '91 when the constituency was called Shelbrooke Torch River and was a very good listener, I'm told. He was a good MLA. My condolences to the family, to Marilyn, children, and to all his extended members. Rest in peace, Mr. Langford. Your job is done. Thank you for providing the province with guidance and servitude.
Is the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I will, a couple of short comments with respect to the next individual that we honor here today with this condolence motion. It's much more recent. It's Derek Myers, or Duke Myers, Mr. Speaker, of which we saw the passing in this last sitting of the Legislative Assembly, and of which we had a day in this Assembly where we had the opportunity, I think more formally, to honor Derek Myers and his family that supported him throughout life and supported him in his work representing the people from Regina Walsh Acres on the floor of this Assembly. And so my comments will be brief in light of those comments from a number of months ago. And I welcome his wife, loving wife, Lori, here today. But I was reminded yesterday as I returned to the capital city after the weekend that I had with my family, Mr. Speaker, of a phone call that I had got after Derek's passing, but prior to his funeral. Mr. Speaker, was from Tina Beaudry Miller, and she was putting together it was before his passing. And because Derek did see it in the last day or two that he was with us, Mr. Speaker, and she'd asked, and she's putting together a video montage to just kind of keep Derek's spirits up. And that particular day, I was going snowmobiling with my brother and a couple of nephews, my brother's children. And so we were out just before we had left. We had our snowmobiles running. We were outside and doing what I think Derek did each and every day, which was loving life, appreciating life with the people that are most important to you. And so I shot a quick video and I'd sent it off, and it wasn't until I saw that video a little later that I was reminded of how thankful I am to have the opportunity to emulate how thankful Derek was in each and every move and each and every conversation and each and everything he did. He always had time to talk to the people around him. He understood fully what the priorities were in his life, and they were people, the people that were closest with him, his wife, his children, his family, his colleagues. Mr. Speaker, Derek was one individual that certainly didn't have what was important to him in any way mixed up. He had his priorities very, very much straight. He had an appreciation and zeal for life that I think each of us can strive to bring with us into whatever we do each and every day. He had an appreciation for people that he ran across, each and every day that I think, again, would do each of us well. Mr. Speaker, he will be missed forever, not only by his family, but by the long, long list of friends that Derek blessed with his time on earth. Mr. Speaker, I would move the following motion, that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and expresses its grateful appreciation of the contribution that he made to his community, to his constituency, and to the province. Derek Blake Myers, who passed away on March the 28th, 2023 at the age of 45 after battling cancer, was a member of this Legislative Assembly from 2020 until 2023. He represented the constituency of Regina Walsh Acres for the Saskatchewan Party. Born on September the 4th, 1977, Mr. Myers grew up on the family farm near Mydale. And he began his career working in the southeastern Saskatchewan oil field at Mydale Petroleum, starting off as a summer student on the maintenance crew and eventually moving into the geological exploration and consulting field. In 2005, he decided to pursue his studies in television broadcasting at the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology and subsequently spent nearly 10 years covering sports at Global News Regina. Additionally, he was a dedicated member of the Regina sports media, contributing frequently to CKRM's Sport Cage and hosting SJHL broadcasts for SaskTel's Max TV. Mr. Myers is remembered for his numerous contributions to the province, particularly to his advocacy for mental health and suicide prevention. As a small business owner in a video production service, he volunteered with the Canadian Mental Health Association and produced videos for the organization. Mr. Myers is survived and he's sadly missed by his partner Laurie, his children Dane and Sebastian and Isley, as well as all of his extended family. He was predeceased by his daughter Taya. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy with members of the bereaved family. I so move.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to join with the Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Mr. Derek Myers. It does hits close to home when it's someone that we've all served with in this Assembly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I know that some, particularly members opposite, were quite close to Mr. Myers, and I can only imagine how that feels, Mr. Speaker. Derek was a member of the Legislative Assembly from 2020 to 2023, only for a short amount of time. He was particularly known for his advocacy in mental health and suicide prevention, and it always said so much to me about his character that he could take very personal experiences and speak about them and use that sort of for political advocacy, because that's quite a vulnerable situation to put yourself in as an individual and as a family. So I do want to thank him for that advocacy. He wasn't, he was sort of late to come into the political world, as the Premier mentioned, as he was raised on a farm near Mydale and came from a family who was involved in oil exploration and production, and later became a geologist before he became a sports reporter and anchor with Global News. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that I will, always fondly remember his booming broadcaster voice carrying through the Assembly here. He had such a presence in this space, and it's not one that is easily forgotten. Even when he was speaking in the Assembly, but also when he was enjoying a laugh with colleagues. His presence was always noted, and it was always such a warm presence in this space. On behalf of the official opposition, I want to join in this condolence motion, thank Mr. Myers for his service, and offer my condolences to Lori and the rest of the family on our behalf. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon Riversdale.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to join with the Premier and with the member opposite. Just say a few words about my former seatmate, Derek Myers. This was a colleague and friend with incredible strength and optimism. And just unbelievable how his attitude was always so great, even really in his toughest times. And, you know, I don't know if it was his goal every day, but he just made us smile. You couldn't help but smile when you're around Derek. And wow, did he love what he did here, serving the constituents. And I would say not just the wall shakers, anywhere he was, whatever room he was in, he really got in this to make a difference. And Derek, your memory will always live on, and your government family misses you. And we know that we will never forget you, and we will continue to push forward with so many of your good ideas in making this province a better place. Thank you.
I recognize a member from Regina Wallachshaker.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As the Premier and the member from Saskatoon Fairview and Saskatoon Riversdale have outlined, Derek Myers had a big impact on this province. And in my maiden speech in October, I spoke about the loss of Mr. Myers and recognized that my privilege of being elected as the MLA for Regina Wallshakers was the result of his tragic passing. Now, I never had the opportunity to meet Mr. Myers, but over the last year, I have had the opportunity and the honor to meet many of his friends, even members on the opposite side of the floor. And all of those people have spoke very fondly of him. I also had the privilege of reading many of the speeches that he had given in the Assembly during his time as MLA. And from what I read and what I've heard from friends and what we've heard already today on the floor is that he was a pretty amazing human being. And by all accounts, you know, he was an MLA in it for all the right reasons, and that was to serve others. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to extend my deepest condolences to Mr. Myers' family, specifically his wife, Lori, who's here today. I also want to extend my condolences to all the members on the opposite side of the House for the loss of their friend and colleague. And I would like to offer my condolences to the many people in Regina Wallshakers who I know are still mourning the loss of their friend, Derek Myers. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Regina Rosedale.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair of Committees. Lao Tzu wrote in 6th century BC, "The flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long." And that was Derek. He was passionate and he burned very bright. He will be missed by so many of us. People in Wallshakers miss him greatly. I have so many people, because our constituencies border each other, come and say how much they miss Derek. They missed his enthusiasm. They just missed how he came to work excited about what he got to do every day. I must say, we all will miss Derek. At his celebration of life, his mom came up and gave me the biggest hug. It was fierce. And she said, "You know, it's not right. It's not right when we lose our children before us." I know, been there. I had told her, whispered in her ear, "It hurts really hard today, but it does get better. But we will never forget." Thank you.
Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly
and express its grateful appreciations of the contribution he made to his community, his constituency, and to the province. Christopher S. Axworthy, who passed away on August 11, 2023, at the age of 76, was a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1999 until 2003, representing the constituency of Saskatoon-Fairhaven, or Fairview, for the New Democratic Party. Mr. Axworthy served on Executive Council as Minister of Justice and Attorney General, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, and Minister of Aboriginal Affairs. Born in Plymouth, England on March 10, 1947, Mr. Axworthy earned a Bachelor of Law at London Metropolitan University before moving to Canada in 1970 to pursue a Master of Laws at McGill University. He then embarked on a teaching career, first at the University of New Brunswick and then at Dalhousie University. In 1984, he was relocated to Saskatoon to teach law at the University of Saskatchewan and established the University Centre for the Study of Cooperatives, serving as its executive director. There, he became involved in the New Democratic Party and the city's cooperative organizations, serving on the board of directors of Saskatoon Co-op. In 1988, Mr. Axworthy began a career in politics, representing the New Democratic Party in the House of Commons from 1988 until 1999, when he resigned his federal seat to run provincially. In 2003, he returned to academic life at the University of Saskatchewan College of Law. Mr. Axworthy subsequently served as the Dean of the College of Law at the University of Manitoba, as well as founding Dean of a new College of Law at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops. After retiring from academic life in 2013, he moved to Ottawa with his wife, Michelle. Mr. Axworthy is survived and sadly missed by his wife, Michelle, stepdaughter, Maifanwa, and extended family. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to join in with the Deputy Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Mr. Christopher Axworthy. Mr. Axworthy was a member of the Legislative Assembly between 1999 and 2003 and represented the constituency that I now represent, which is Saskatoon Fairview. He had a distinguished career in law, in addition to politics, Mr. Speaker, as well as serving as a member of Parliament prior to being an MLA. And I know he continued on with his academic life, eventually at the University of Saskatchewan College of Law as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Axworthy won his provincial seat in a by-election in Saskatoon Fairview, which is also something that we have in common, although he faced a general election only 3 months later, whereas I had 3 years to prepare for the general election after that. He joined Premier Roy Romano's cabinet in 1999, and after Romano stepped down as leader of the party, Axworthy ran for party leadership and finished second, next to Premier Lauren Calvert. Marcus Davies, a close friend and former chief of staff for Axworthy, said that growing up working class in England in the 1950s shaped Axworthy's commitment to social justice and his belief that as a society, we should leave no one behind. Mr. Speaker, I never had a chance to connect with Mr. Axworthy personally, but when I moved to the west side of Saskatoon when I was in grade school, I remember very clearly, it was in the fall of 1996, I remember very clearly that Mr. Axworthy's signs were the first political signs that I ever took note of and saw the support across the west side of Saskatoon. It was, I didn't have a very political family at that point, so it's something that really struck me in terms of seeing that visible showing of support. I do want to, on behalf of the official opposition, thank Mr. Axworthy for his service to the province and pass along my condolences to his family.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Miigwech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I also want to join the Deputy Premier and the Opposition Leader in speaking to the condolence motion for Mr. Chris Axworthy. I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Axworthy when I was a young single parent that was new in Saskatoon. And I was having some challenges with issues about access. And I guess it was suggested to me to reach out to my MP's office. And I called Mr. Axworthy's office, really not believing that I would ever receive a call, let alone have anyone address the issue that I was bringing. I left a message and carried on with my life thinking, they're not going to work, they're not going to pay attention. Well, not even 2 days later, I get a call from Mr. Axworthy saying he's my MP and that he was going to help me. And I was blown away because I thought, here is a very important man calling me personally saying, I'm going to help you. Our office is going to help you. And he said, we'll call you as soon as, pretty soon. And again, after that call ended, I really wasn't sure what, if anything, could be done. Lo and behold, within a matter of days, the issue that I was dealing with was dealt with. And I got a follow-up call from Mr. Axworthy asking me, well, first of all, informing me and telling me that we were able to resolve that issue for you. And that I guess what I got from that was, here is a man, an elected MP, an elected individual, that actually cared about the issues that I was having as a single First Nation young parent. And he addressed those, not months later, but within days. And that told me how there were people out there that cared. And as I learned more about Mr. Axworthy and when he became an MLA, hearing from my family, from community people, that he was a strong advocate for Indigenous people. And I felt always at that time that special connection and remembering how he took the call. He called me and then he followed up. And when I've heard of his passing, I thought we lost a really good man. And I just want to say to his family, thank you for sharing Chris with us. And I offer my heartfelt condolences to you and to his friends. Gitcha miigwech, Chris, for your work for the people of Saskatchewan and for Canada. Miigwech.
Is it the pleasure of Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Deputy Chair of Committee, I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and express its grateful appreciation of the contribution he made to his community, his constituency, and to the province. Miro Kwasnika, who passed away on December 24, 2023 at the age of 88, was a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1967 until 1978. He represented the constituencies of Cutknife and Cutknife-Lloydminster for the New Democratic Party. Mr. Kwasnika was born on June 13, 1935, in Waka, Saskatchewan. Shortly after completing high school, he embarked on a career in education, earning an intern teaching certificate through the Saskatoon Teachers College, followed by a Bachelor of Education from the University of Saskatchewan in 1963. He went on to teach at Lloydminster Comprehensive High School for over 20 years. Following his time in the legislature, Mr. Kwasnika moved to Victoria, BC, where he worked in finance and life insurance until his retirement at the age of 75. Throughout his career, Mr. Kwasnika was heavily involved in teacher organization work, serving for a time as president of the Lloydminster Teachers Association and as a member of the Teachers' Salary Negotiating Committee, eventually assuming the role of committee chairman. He also served as the public speaking coordinator for Lloydminster Superintendees for a year. A strong supporter of the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, Mr. Kwasnika assisted with the party's activities within the Cutknife constituency over the years, including as a public relations officer and canvasser coordinator. Mr. Kwasnika was survived and sadly missed by his wife, Ruth, his children, Amanda, Robin, Sarah, Jonathan, Emma, Jessica, and Andrew, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy with members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honoured to join with the Deputy Premier in supporting the condolence motion for Miro Kwasnika, who served the Legislative Assembly from 1967 to 1978 for the constituencies of Cutknife and Cutknife-Lloydminster for the New Democratic Party. He served actively as a teacher and in teacher organization work throughout his career. In addition to being an esteemed teacher, he was quite involved in the community as well. He taught at the Lloydminster Comprehensive High School from 1961 to 1983. He taught English, social studies, and driver's education. Mr. Kwasnika was an avid musician and sang, played the fiddle and the electric guitar, and performed in bands at weddings and dance parties over the course of his life, which all started at the age of 9, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honoured on behalf of the official opposition to join with the Deputy Premier in providing my condolences and thanking Mr. Kwasnika for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and offering condolences to his family on behalf of the official opposition.
Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Deputy Chair, I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and expresses its grateful appreciation of the contribution he made to his community, his constituency, and to the province. Pierre Raymond Martino, who passed away on November 18, 2023 at the age of 88, was a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1986 until 1987. He represented the constituency of Saskatoon Eastview for the Progressive Conservative Party. Born on September 12, 1935, Mr. Martino grew up in Saskatoon, where he attended Saskatoon Technical Collegiate before obtaining a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Saskatchewan College of Commerce. While in school, he worked variously as labourer, pipe fitter, machine operator, and foreman. After completing his education, Mr. Martino embarked on a career in the road building industry, starting out as a sales representative for the Pounder Emulsions in 1966. He worked his way up in the company, ultimately buying it out in 1982 and later selling it to Husky Oil under an arrangement that would see him continue to run it. At the time of his election in 1986, he was Pounder Emulsions Vice President, General Manager, and Director. Upon his departure from the Assembly, he returned to the private sector. Mr. Martino contributed to his community in many ways throughout his life, volunteering for the Saskatoon Jazz Society, fundraising for the Saskatchewan Jazz Festival, serving on the board of the Mendel Art Gallery, and acting as chair of the Mendel Art Gallery Foundation. He also served as director of the Saskatoon Lions Club, president of Saskatoon's Brevoort Park Recreational Association, chairman of the Saskatchewan Technical Institute's Heavy Equipment Advisory Board in Moose Jaw, and director of the Saskatchewan Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association. Mr. Martino is survived and sadly missed by his children, Suzanne and Luann, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to the members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honored to join in with the Deputy Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Ray Martineau, MLA from 1986 to 1987 for the constituency of Saskatoon Eastview. Ray Martineau had a career in the road building industry and was actively involved in and contributed to the community in Saskatoon with the Jazz Society and the Mendel Art Gallery and the Lions Clubs being quite notable, although he has a long list of community engagements and accomplishments, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Martineau was a long-standing member of Saskatoon's West Side community, growing up on Avenue F, Avenue R, and Avenue C, and attending St. Mary's, as well as Saskatoon Technical Collegiate and St. Paul's High School. Mr. Deputy Speaker, on behalf of the official opposition, I want to thank Mr. Ray Martineau for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and pass along our condolences to his family.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon Southeast.
Deputy Speaker, I met Ray Martineau when I was volunteering in the 1986 election. He ran successfully in Saskatoon Eastview, which was, prior to that, Kim Young's seat. Kim did not run in 1986 and was later appointed to the provincial court bench. Ray had sold his business, Pounder Emulsions, when he was in his early 50s. He was well-intentioned, he believed in Saskatchewan, he ran for all of the right reasons. However, he was frustrated with the pace of government and soon left. After he left politics, he put his considerable energies and abilities to work for a number of great causes, including the Mendel Art Gallery, the Mendel Gallery Foundation, and the Saskatchewan Jazz Festival. He also belonged to the Jubilee Investment Club, which is Canada's longest-running investment social club. He drafted me to run for that. I regularly lost money there. Raymond had a keen sense of humor and was incredibly outspoken. I'm going to share one brief story. During the 1986 election, I was working as a fundraiser. Ray sent me to ask for a donation from a successful Saskatoon business person who shall remain nameless. I returned with a check for something like $100. Ray took his own check, put it into an envelope, took out the checkbook, and he wrote a check back to the businessman for several $1,000s, and he wrote a note to the man. I won't be cashing your check. I didn't realize that you were in such dire financial straits. I'm enclosing my check to you, which I hope helps you get through. With some trepidation, I went back and hand-delivered it to the businessman. The gentleman looked at it, he twitched a bit. I could see a vein in his forehead pulsing. Then the man exploded with laughter and wrote a very generous check. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's all you need to know about Ray Martino. To Suzanne and Luann, Sandy and I want to join with the MLAs and with the government and send our personal condolences and best wishes. Thank you.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon, Me Wasson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to be on my feet today, joining with the Deputy Premier, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, and members opposite, and bringing condolence remarks on behalf of my colleague, the member from Saskatoon Eastview, and myself. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Mr. Martineau served the people as a member from the East Side, but he will always be a true son of Saskatoon's West Side, growing up on Avenue F, Avenue R, Avenue C, attending St. Mary's School, Saskatoon Technical Collegiate, and St. Paul's High School. It is an honor to join in condolence motion for Mr. Martineau, as I had the pleasure of meeting his family on the doorstep during the Saskatoon-Me Wasson by-election in 2022, as Mr. Martineau and his spouse were constituents of mine, having lived in the River Heights neighborhood in the last years of their life, supported by their family. Mr. Deputy Speaker, hearing about Mr. Martineau's legacy reveals just how much of an impact he made on his community. As critic for Parks, Culture and Sport, I was so pleased to hear about the work Mr. Martineau did with the Saskatoon Jazz Society, the fundraising he did for the Saskatchewan Jazz Festival, and the work that he contributed to the Mendel Art Galleries Board and the chair of the board of the Mendel Art Gallery Foundation. Crucial governance work that ensured everyone in Saskatoon, to this day, has access to life-changing art experiences. I know that Mr. Martineau will be remembered for his lasting impact on the arts community of his cherished hometown. Mr. Martineau will also be remembered for his impact on the Saskatoon business community, his impact on numerous boards and community organizations, and for his time serving the province he loved as an MLA. One line in Mr. Martineau's obituary stood out to me, and I would love to read it here today. For those who wish to remember Ray, drink a coffee, black and cold, eat some smoked sprats on burnt toast with cream cheese and thick sliced onion, and put some jazz on the turntable. Then look out the window and marvel at the magnificence of the sky, the birds, the trees, and of course the squirrels. To the family he leaves behind, thank you so much for sharing your father with us, and thank you for supporting him during his time serving the province as an MLA. Our hearts are with you as you work through the loss of this beloved family member.
I recognize the Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Just wanted to join with the member opposite and the members on this side in remembering Raymond or Ray Martino. He was a larger-than-life personality, a former Conservative member in the 1980s, as stated, a successful business leader, and a committed volunteer. He was notably very involved on the board of the Mendel Art Gallery, not a fan of the Ramey Art Gallery, which he made very clear. Certainly his friends and family will know that all too well, and anyone else who would listen, Mr. Deputy Speaker. He was a proud West Sider. As stated, a proud Saskatoonian, very outspoken, very political. And to that end, Ray was also an early supporter of me, for which I'll always be grateful. He was very opinionated, very candid. He spoke and told you things whether you really wanted to hear them or not, certainly spoke his mind, but he was also very loyal. His wife, Mary Lou, sadly predeceased him, but I would like to join with the member for Saskatoon Southeast and the member for Me Wasson and the Deputy Premier, and to extend our condolences and my personal condolences to Suzanne and Luann, whom I know and went to school with, and to say, may you rest in peace, Ray Martino.
Is the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Deputy Chair, I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and express its grateful appreciation of the contribution he made to his community, his constituency, and to the province. Randy Neil Nelson, who passed away on July 30th, 2023, at the age of 97, was a member of the Legislative Assembly from 1975 until 1982. He represented the constituency of Yorkton for the New Democratic Party. Mr. Nelson was born in Rosetown on June 6, 1926, and raised in the Ruthilda area. Despite youthful intentions of becoming a farmer, in 1947 he set off for Saskatoon Normal School to pursue teaching and spent the next several years teaching in rural and 2 small town schools. In 1957, he headed to the University of Saskatchewan to finish a Bachelor of Education degree, upon completion of which he relocated his family to Yorkton. There he spent most of the next 25 years teaching high school French and raising his children alongside his wife, Isabel. After leaving the legislature, Mr. Nelson briefly returned to teaching before moving to Saskatoon in 1983. Outside of the legislature, Mr. Nelson was actively engaged in his community. In his youth, he served on the executive of both the provincial and federal NDP associations in Yorkton. He volunteered at the Yorkton Oratory Society, held a leadership role at the University of Saskatchewan's Alumni Association, and served as a Saskatchewan Teachers Federation salary negotiation consultant for teachers in the Yorkton area. Later in life, he also served as the chair of the Saskatoon Food Bank's fundraising committee. Mr. Nelson is survived and sadly missed by his children, Helen, Fred, Byron, and Carolyn, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to the members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's an honor to join in with the Deputy Premier in supporting the condolence motion here for Randy Nelson. Mr. Nelson was an MLA from 1975 to 1982. He taught in 3 rural schools and 2 small towns before moving to Saskatoon to complete his Bachelor of Education degree. After moving back to Yorkton, he taught French to students of various origins, an experience that he says he truly enjoyed. In addition to teaching, he was involved in the Yorkton Oratory Society, the U of S Alumni Association, and served as a salary negotiation consultant for the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation for teachers in the Yorkton area. In his words, quote, "As a result of my political activism and with Isabel's excellent assistance, Yorkton people gave me one of my life's greatest honors when I was twice elected as NDP MLA for the Yorkton provincial constituency, servicing from 1975 to 1982. It's difficult to fully express my great gratitude to all the people who believed in me and who worked and voted for me in those elections." And further, quote, "It was also a great privilege and honor to be elected with many NDP MLAs who service with me. Because of the honesty, integrity, and ingenuity of Mr. Blakeney and his government, we were all proud to have the privilege to service under such inspired and inspiring leadership," end quote. Mr. Nelson seems to have had a lot of wit. He has been known to write letters to the editor, and he even wrote his own obituary. In lieu of flowers, he asked that his friends and loved ones make a donation to the Saskatchewan NDP. Madam Speaker, Deputy Speaker, we are honored on behalf of the official opposition to thank Mr. Nelson for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and to pass along our condolences to his surviving family.
I recognize the member from Yorkton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's my honor to join in the condolence motions this afternoon and honor the memory of Randy Nelson. Randy was, as many as have spoken here today and many would know back home, a very dedicated educator. And although has been heard very, very active in his political party in the NDP, the one thing I always appreciated about Mr. Nelson, he'd never know his politics in the classroom. He was just very, very active, but just an amazing teacher and a great community leader that so many really did respect. Again, amazing community leader and well-known. His legacy does live on in Yorkton. Many still remember him today, although he's been gone from the city for about 40 years. 97 years, just an amazing life, amazing legacy. Most of his family I didn't know very well. Isabel I did know a little bit. I remember him I was a younger person, obviously, and in his political career, but I do remember him more after his MLA duties and as an educator. Again, I didn't know a lot of the siblings too well, but Carolyn and Nancy I knew very well. Nancy, unfortunately, I went to school with her. Unfortunately, we lost her to her health issues about 3 years ago now. So, just an amazing family. Nancy ended up being a fairly good friend of mine. She worked at a business that I frequent quite often, and I had a lot of good conversations with her about her dad's past history and then my years serving in this place, and kind of comparing notes, I suppose. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's with great sorrow that I join in these debates and offer my condolences to the family.
So is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Oh, sorry, I recognize the member from Saskatoon Centre.
Miigwech, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I also want to join my colleagues in offering my condolences and also just recording this, my comments. Mr. Nelson was a constituent of mine in the last years of his life. When I ran for nomination, I received a handwritten letter from Mr. Nelson asking me to, well, first of all, congratulating me on running for nomination, but also asking me to sit down and have a coffee with him, and that he will organize a coffee meeting and bring other residents to come and chat with me. And at first I was like, oh, somebody took the time to write a handwritten letter. And yeah, here he sent me this, we met, and the first thing I thought about when I met Randy was he was quite spry, and had a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of energy. And saw him at many events where he would come out and volunteer. And I have had a few handwritten letters from him, and the first one, I guess, the first couple, I have somewhere tucked away in my home. And what struck me was, and I asked him, how come you don't use a computer to write like everybody else? And he says, it's more personable when you write a letter, a handwritten letter. And I always thought how, and he would share with me the work he did as an MLA, and also his energy was quite contagious. And I thought, wow, this is a man that has served and in his 90s still having the energy and the enthusiasm to lend a hand. And of course, with the NDP, it was wonderful to see him. And I just want to offer my heartfelt condolences to his family, his children, his grandchildren, and those that cherished him and loved him. Miigwech.
Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and express its grateful appreciation of the contribution he made to his community, his constituency, and to the province. Glenn Howard Panner, who passed away on June 5th, 2023 at the age of 82, was a member of this Legislative Assembly from 1975 until 1978. He represented the constituency of Saskatoon Eastview for the Liberal Party. Born in Dodsland on July 20th, 1940, Mr. Panner spent most of his life in Saskatoon. He attended the University of Saskatchewan, where he earned both bachelor's and master's degrees in education. From there, Mr. Penner embarked on a nearly 40-year career in the education sector, working in many roles from teacher to director of education. He also served for a time as the president of the Saskatoon Teachers Association. Mr. Penner was deeply involved in politics throughout his life. He was first elected to Saskatoon City Council in 1972, and from 1975 to 1976, he served simultaneously as the City Councillor, member of the Legislative Assembly, and director of Saskatoon East School Division. After leaving the legislature, he served 3 additional terms on Saskatoon City Council between 1979 and 2012. He also served on many boards and committees and supported community organizations such as the United Way and the Salvation Army. In his honour of this community service, a green space in Saskatoon's Rosewood neighbourhood was called Glen H. Penner Park. Mr. Penner has survived and sadly missed by his wife Wilma and his children Jan and Brent and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to the members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honored to join in with the Deputy Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Mr. Glen Penner, who served as an MLA in this Assembly from 1975 to 1978. Mr. Penner spent nearly 4 decades in the education sector, moving from teacher to director of education. He attended City Park Collegiate, which is where his interest in debate was apparently first sparked through participation in the debate club. Mr. Penner had a love for all things politics and served in municipal politics as well. He finally decided not to run for City Council again at the age of 72, and after more than 25 years on City Council. He was less than 50 days shy of the record of the most days served on Saskatoon City Council, Mr. Speaker. We want to thank him for his life of commitment, of service. We know that he was also a lifelong fan of the Saskatchewan Roughriders, the Blue Jays, and the Toronto Maple Leafs, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the official opposition, I want to thank Mr. Penner for his service to the province of Saskatchewan and offer our condolences to the surviving family.
I recognize the member from Saskatoon, Churchill Wildwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair of Committees. I'd like to join with the Deputy Premier and the member opposite to share some words about Mr. Glen Penner. So I met Mr. Penner in the early 1980s. He was a big figure and when I was producing the John Gormley Open Line show on CFQC Radio. So he was a Saskatoon City Councillor at the time and a guest on our radio program. He represented the neighbourhood of Brevert Park as a City Councillor, and that's an area that I now serve as an MLA. As mentioned, he had a lifelong love of hockey and baseball and was a fan of the Maple Leafs, the Riders, the Blue Jays. He would have been disappointed with the Maple Leaf loss in last night's overtime playoff Game 7 against the Boston Bruins if he was still with us. So he had a very long and distinguished career in education, teacher, vice principal, and principal with the Saskatoon Public School Division, a director of education for the Saskatoon East School Division, and then went on to serve as assistant deputy director and regional director with the Ministry of Education. I would like to recognize Mr. Penner's significant community service as a long-serving city councillor. As mentioned, he was just a few weeks shy of the longest serving on Saskatoon City Council. He was an MLA, a member of several boards and committees, and one knows that community service is significant when a city park bears your name. I know Glen's son, Brent Penner, and I would like to offer my sincere condolences to the Penner family for their loss. Thank you.
The pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion. Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I move that this Assembly records with sorrow and regret the passing of a former member of this Assembly and express its grateful appreciation of the contributions she made to her community, her constituency, and to the province. Violet Vi Laverne Stranger, who passed away on February 6, 2023 at the age of 82, represented the constituencies of Cuttknife Lloydminster from 1991 to 1995 and Lloydminster from 1995 to 1999 for the New Democratic Party. Born on November 16, 1940, Mrs. Stranger grew up living in small towns in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. After high school, she attended normal school in Saskatoon before beginning her decades-long teaching career at Tisdale Public, specializing in primary education. In 1982, Ms. Stranger earned her Bachelor of Education degree from the University of Saskatchewan. By the time she was elected to the legislature in 1991, Ms. Stranger was already being actively involved in political organization for many years. Her parents were early members of the Cooperative Commonwealth Federation, and she herself volunteered at the grassroots level for the CCF and the NDP. Ms. Stranger contributed to her community in many ways, holding roles that included Maidstone Town Council's first female alderman, director of the Waseca Credit Union Board, president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation Local Number 60, and various memberships and elected positions in organizations such as the Big Sisters Club of Lloydminster and the University of Saskatchewan Senate. Following the conclusion of her time in the Assembly in 1999, Ms. Stranger moved to Regina, where she served on the board of directors of SIAST and the Connexus Credit Union. Ms. Stranger is survived and sadly missed by her husband, Ron, and her children, Dawn and Denise, and their families. In recording its own deep sense of loss and bereavement, this Assembly expresses its most sincere sympathy to members of the bereaved family.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is the Assembly ready for the question? I recognize the member from Saskatoon Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'm honoured to join with the Deputy Premier in supporting this condolence motion for Vi Stanger, who was an MLA between 1995 and 1999 for the Saskatchewan New Democratic Party. As was mentioned, Ms. Stanger represented the constituencies of Cuttknife Lloydminster and as well as Lloydminster between this period of time. In 1971, Ms. Stanger's family moved to Maidstone, where she taught grade 1 for 26 years, setting in motion the academic careers of generations. Ms. Stanger was the first woman elected to the Maidstone Town Council and to serve on the Waseca Credit Union Board. In addition to a number of other volunteer services, including being the president of the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation Local Number 60 and various memberships and elected positions on organizations such as Big Sisters Club of Lloyd and the University of Saskatchewan Senate. Her family notes that one of her proudest memories was that their family was able to give up a bed for one night to Tommy Douglas while he was campaigning in Saskatchewan in the early 1940s. Mr. Deputy Speaker, many members of our party will remember Vi Stanger, and she is missed by many folks across the province. And on behalf of the official opposition, I want to thank her for her service to the province of Saskatchewan and offer condolences to her bereaved family.
Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to move a motion of transmittal.
Will the House take the motion as read? Is leave granted?
Agreed.
Agreed. I recognize the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I move that notwithstanding Rule 8.2 of the Rules and Procedures of the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan, the Speaker, on behalf of the Legislative Assembly, transmit copies of the official records of the tributes to the bereaved families in memory of the deceased members.
Will the House take the motion as read? Agreed. And is the Assembly ready for the question? Is the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. I recognize the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In order to facilitate the work of committee, I move that this House do now adjourn.
Government House Leader move to adjourn this House. Is it the pleasure of the Assembly to adopt the motion? Carried. This House now stay adjourned until tomorrow 1:30 p.m.